Helium objectively is one of the most successful crypto projects in crypto history, objectively. The instability makes people lean back into faith in a higher power. There's no atheist in a foxhole. Crypto has a really bad track record of execution. 99% of it is vaporware. This kind of hyper woke, crazy gender stuff. We're gonna turn kids trans. That shit is just is evil, 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 evil stuff. It is also a death cult. It will collapse a birth rate and disintegrate a society. There is no industry that worships money like the hedge fund industry. None. The Bible is filled with stories of God using flawed people to do good in this world. And Trump is a flawed guy. The most popular implementation of a stablecoin is Tether on Tron. And Tron is a Google sheet that's run by Justin Sun. So it's like, whoops. And then FTX happens. What we are promised is a peace that surpasses understanding. The absence of the light strengthened my conviction in the existence of the light.
Welcome to the Allocators Podcast, episode 2 with Travis Kling. Really excited for this one, Travis. I want to give credit where it's due in terms of how this conversation came about. So you tweeted, "Let's go God," on a screenshot of a headline about Bible sales being up 20 or 22% year over year. So I thought that was interesting because I followed you for a while, but that kind of seemed to indicate you were a Christian of some sort. And then I feel very much the same way, and I'm also excited about that news. So I quote tweeted it and said something like, there's a lot more to life than what you see and feel on the surface. The human experience is incomplete without the search for and discovery of something greater. Glad more people are waking up. And that's really how I feel, and I think that's how you felt too. So that was kind of the origin of this conversation. You DM'd me to catch up on a conversation we were having previously, and then like, let's do a pod. Let's talk a lot about God, faith, and obviously about crypto and markets and trading too. So to kick us off, I'm curious why you think the modern world has become so faithless. Like what factors have played into that, whether it's societal, whether it's technological, just how have we ended up kind of where we're at today?
So I feel like I can speak more to American culture than anything else. My knowledge, my firsthand, experience is so American. I think, and the stats are clear. You can see them. I've looked at them. I've got them saved down. The fastest growing religion in the United States is none. From a statistical perspective, in terms of like, what are people checking on? What boxes are people checking on? Surveys, church attendance is down, churches are closing. That was happening before COVID, but there's acceleration of that. And I think it's a confluence of factors. I think that the internet, the information age, if I was going to point to the single biggest factor, and it shows up on these statistics that I'm talking about when you go and look back over 50 years of faith and religious affiliation surveys. And it seems to really kind of line up with the proliferation of the internet and the information age, and people just, I think, starting to dig more into some of science type of stuff and feeling like science is at odds with what they're hearing from their pastor, or from their religion. And then I think more recently, I think Christian nationalism has been detrimental to, I think it's caused a lot of people to leave Christianity in America, and the alignment of Christianity with the Republican Party. And then some of the stances around homosexuality, some of the stances around abortion, the Christian church has lost, and I think sort of what your views are on those two things, that's sort of a separate conversation. But I just, from having spent a lot of time kind of looking at this, I get the sense that the Christian church lost a lot of members off of those two things in particular.
Yeah, it almost feels like the more technology advances, the more powerful humans get in terms of manipulating their environments and making things easy for themselves. And it's almost kind of like the more godlike we get as humans, right? And in terms of abortion and contraception and all of those, I mean, a million other things too, curing diseases, starting diseases, whatever it is. And so yeah, I feel like humanity probably just looks to that kind of technological power and is almost like feels better about themselves and has less to worry about. And so therefore there's less of a distance between the lowly humans and the all powerful God, kind of like things were in the medieval ages or something when things went wrong and you're like, woe is me. What do I do? I better pray.
No, I think that resonates a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think the whole Bible sales being up 22% year over year, is that like a lone bright spot, like a flash in the pan, it's going to go away? Or do you think like times are changing?
Yeah, no, I think that feels like a trend shift for a few different reasons. If I think about Ukraine and Russia and then Gaza and then Trump getting shot in the face, it's a lot of instability. And the instability makes people lean back into faith in a higher power. There's no atheist in a foxhole, that kind of saying. So I think that was a meaningful part of it. Two other things I would mention around that. I think the UAP stuff, I think gets people thinking more about a God. And I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it's obviously crazy. And the amount of stuff that the government has just in the last 18 months or whatever it is, just opened up about, with Commander Mark, whatever that jet pilot's name was, and the stuff that he was seeing, and just the legitimacy around this UAP stuff seems to have taken a different leg than what that whole thing felt like for years and years and years. And it's not something I'm super into, but I know a lot of people are. And then I think there's aspects of science, cosmology, quantum physics. I think that there are aspects of those types of studies that are leading people to start to rethink their belief in creationism. Just some entity, we can talk about Christianity or Muslim or Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever, but just a higher power, a creator that created all of this. I don't see anything, and I am very passionate about sort of the intersection of faith and science. It's a place I spend a lot of time personally, kind of researching and thinking about, writing about. And I really don't see anything in science. Like when I dig into that stuff, it makes me believe more in a higher power, not less.
Same.
And I know that there was a period of time where I think a lot of people in American society felt the other way, where they felt like science was chipping away at what they had been told in church for a long period of time. And I get that. And it seems to me like now there's aspects of science that are like swinging back the other way. And even something like the Big Bang just sounds a lot to me like right when God created this universe. Like it's just like that was the moment that the light switch came on.
100%.
And it's amazing to me that the science community, the cosmology community is in really broad agreement about what the universe looked like 1/1,000,000th of 1 second before the Big Bang. There's like very broad agreement about what it looked like. And science feels like, science gets this stuff wrong. So you always have to be a little careful about putting, all your eggs in a basket like this. But science disagrees to varying degrees about a lot of different things. There's quite a broad agreement about what the universe looked like 1/1,000,000th of 1 second after the Big Bang. And then they have no clue what it looked like the 1/1,000,000th of a second before that. No clue. And to me, I don't know, that just really makes me think like, yeah, that's when God flipped the light switch on all this stuff. And then the other thing I would just mention on the science thing, because I have heard a number of kind of atheist, agnostic, science-minded folks specifically mention this, is like fine-tuning. I don't know if you're familiar with kind of the argument for the existence of God from fine-tuning, but it's like, have you ever heard of the cosmological constant? Like, have you ever heard of this before?
Maybe.
Yeah, so it's basically just like science has now been able to point to a number of different aspects of the way the universe works, where and maybe it's some random thing that has to do with, some aspect of gravity. And it's like, if some random aspect of gravity was like 0.00 and then 10 zeros and then a one after it, it's exactly this measurement. And if it was any different, like the universe would collapse. And there's actually a bunch of these things now that science has gone and pointed out, where it's like, if that thing was like the tiniest amount different, like this would not exist, like this universe. And I have heard a number of science-minded folks that have really been chewing on that for a while, because it just leads you to believe you wouldn't think that an accident would happen like that. That's not the way that you would logically assume an accident would happen. That feels like it has some type of intentionality around it. Yeah. One more thing I'll mention on this, because in terms of like it's like if faith was a stock, I would be like a buyer of faith as a stock. I think faith as a stock is heading higher. I think it's been heading higher. The Bible sale thing that you mentioned is just one aspect of that, and I think it's going to continue to head higher. Another part of that I have seen people talk about is like, you had a big movement in atheism that was led by like the four horsemen of New Atheism. It's like Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins and who's the fourth guy? His name escapes me, but so these four guys started talking a lot. Sam Harris grew to be immensely popular. Richard Dawkins has been popular for decades. Daniel Dennett, popular for a long time. But their voices, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago or something like that. Their voices started getting a lot bigger. And I think people started to subscribe to their way of thinking, because a lot of it, there's aspects of it that can be compelling from a logic perspective. And then I think what I've seen just recently over the last year or maybe two is people are seeing atheism that was sort of touted, this kind of new, quote unquote, new atheism that was touted by these big figureheads. And they're like trying to live their life like this. And they're realizing it's just a bad way to live your life. This is just not it leads to nihilism. It leads to deep-seated existential dread. It leads to a moral framework without the triangulation to a higher power, which atheists are trying. This is what effective altruism is. This is utilitarianism. These sorts of things. The establishment of a moral framework absent the triangulation of a higher power, we just do not have any kind of evidence that this works at scale over any significant period of time. And I think on the micro level, people feel it, like in their individual own lives, they just feel it not working very well. It makes people depressed. And so I think what you're seeing over the last year or so is this sort of like backing out of trying to take on an atheistic worldview, because you're like, I'm a logical person, I'm a science-minded person, I listen to Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and all of these guys, and it's led me to atheism. Now I'm going to go live my life like this. And then you try it out for a little while, and you're like, wow, this is kind of like a shitty way to go through life.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like there's a big kind of pendulum shift in a lot of different ways, whether it's politics with the election or wokeism or religion with Bible sales. You've talked about the 2024 election being kind of like spiritual warfare. You tweeted about that, in regards to a Nick Carter kind of blog post about the same. What are your thoughts on kind of how apparent the spiritual warfare was in 2024 versus maybe other years? And where do you think we're headed over the next 4 with Trump in office, with respect to crypto and regulation there?
Yeah, that when I retweeted, I thought Nick kind of had an article about faith in the election. It really resonated with me. Nick's a good friend. We talk often. We've talked about faith before. And I felt that way about it. I felt like, I mean, I don't know how you felt when Trump got shot, but I mean, it was one of the most significant external events of my entire life. That's how I would, it's like you have internal events, like things happen to you, marriage, birth of a child, death of a family member, whatever. But like in terms of external events, it's like 9/11.
Yeah.
I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened. And in this moment and the way that it went down, and I won't pretend to know how God moves in this world. I don't know how God moves in this world. I think God moves in this world. I feel like I have felt God moving in my own life, but I won't pretend to know exactly how that works. But I certainly experienced that Trump thing, and you just go, how did he not get his head blown off?
Yeah.
How did he not get his head blown off? And I had already before that felt like the setup of the current version of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, I felt like in the leadership looked a lot to me like good and evil. And that is not to say that Republican leaderships are without fault. God, Lord knows that is not even remotely close to true. But I'm like kind of this view that there is a group of elites that sit above politicians. You can call them whatever you want to, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them.
Deep state, yeah.
Deep state, all this kind of stuff. It sits above politics, and it's deeply evil. It's child sex trafficking, sacrifice. Like there's too much smoke around all of this. It's all the Epstein stuff. It's all of the Diddy stuff. All of the child trafficking stuff. That there's just a mountain of evidence of this at this point. There's way too much smoke to me for there to be no fire on this kind of deal. And it is a distillation of evil that is of biblical proportions. And it strikes me that it is just without a doubt more aligned with the left than it is with the right. That just seems completely obvious to me. And so I felt like that before Trump's assassination attempt. And some of the hyper woke movement that obviously is completely rooted in the Democratic Party, the hyper woke, this kind of hyper woke, crazy gender stuff. Oh, we're going to have kids. We're going to turn kids trans. Like that shit is just as evil stuff. And it is also a death cult. That's not an exaggeration. I don't know if Alex Jones was the one that started using that term, and people think of it as being hyperbolic. It's not hyperbolic. It is a death cult. It is the type of movements that will disintegrate a society. It will collapse a birth rate and disintegrate a society. Pick up a history book. This has been happening for thousands of years. Human societies, civilizations get super sideways on some society stuff, and the society collapses. This is the story of humanity. And it just looked like a complete no-brainer to me that this was where we were heading with the left and and the proliferation of all of this and how it had sunk. It started in academia, grew out of academia into through DEI and it's DEI, like a lot of these things. It starts off as being well-intentioned, positive intentions, and then it gets warped into these things. And so I felt the consequentialness of this election for all of the reasons that I just talked about. And also because I was of the view, which many other people shared this view, that if the Democrats won this election, that they were going to shuttle so many illegal aliens into swing states and get them registered to vote over the next 4 years. And then they would vote Democratic and then we would move to a one-party system. And that like that would have happened. That's not some idea that I made up, extremely smart political analysts. This is a well understood thing. And there's lots of numbers to back this up, right? So the consequentialness of this election, it felt that way. And then so that was this kind of the good and the evil thing that was wrapped up. That was one thing that I mentioned in the post that you talked about. And then it was even more on display when you had the people at a Kamala rally. So guys yell out, Christ is Lord or Jesus is King, or I can't remember exactly one of those two things. And her knee-jerk reaction, she goes, "Oh, you must be at the wrong rally."
Yeah.
That was her knee-jerk reaction. And a few days later, the exact same thing happens while J.D. Vance is speaking. Same thing, Christ is King or Jesus is Lord or something like that. And he just pauses and he goes, "Yes, he is." Just pauses right in the middle of it. And again, I don't know how good and evil, I don't know exactly how it works. And maybe we can get more into, I have some thoughts around it. I don't know how I feel about Satan, Lucifer, demons. I don't know exactly how that works. My own faith framework, I'm okay with ambiguity there and uncertainty around that. I don't have to, for me personally, I don't have to prescribe to, Satan, eternal damnation in hell. Could be like that. I don't know. But I do think that like a lot of times it seems like evil is hidden in this world. And, there's like the saying, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world that he doesn't exist. And it's like, it's a saying, but like a lot of things like that, there's deep truth. There's some deep truths to that. And so it was so rare to me to see the good of to have it so in your face like that. I just thought was crazy. And then the other point was just that the Bible is filled with stories of God using flawed people to do good in this world. And Trump is he's a flawed guy.
For sure.
It's like he is a flawed guy. Yeah, of course we all are. That's right. We all are. And like, Lord knows, I wish he would talk a little differently or not say some things that he says or be less adversarial or be more unifying or, it's like some of his moral stuff, it's like, I don't know, like a prolific adulterer, like, it's like, I wish he wasn't like that or whatever. Right. But it's like, we all fall short, to your point. Right. And, one of the main takeaways of the Bible, and we, say what you want about the literalness of this, but the Bible is the most influential book in human history. Even atheists agree that the Bible is the most influential book in human history. And it is just filled with stories of flawed people being used by God to do good in this world.
Yeah. No, great recap of all of that. The only last thing I want to hit on politics is I think a lot of, Trump's not in office yet, right? We have about a month for that. I think there's a few things that people expect in the crypto world, like Gary Gensler, being ousted and I think repeal of SAB 121. And then there's also some like hoped for things like, potentially removing crypto taxes on gains or a strategic Bitcoin reserve. That's the most hotly kind of debated one, I think. Like Nick's had some hot takes recently. I saw Ryan Selkis had like a good kind of like middle of the road take as well there. So I'm curious what you think about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Like, will it happen? What form will it take? That kind of thing.
I do not know where I would place the likelihood. I think Polymarket has it at like high 30s, I think. And that feels and I don't know if maybe that's like calendar year 2025 or something. I don't know what the exact definition of the bet is, but that feels somewhere right to me, like 1 in 3 that this would happen. Bitcoin strategic reserve, and the form of that, I mean, I don't mean the the U.S. government stops selling seized Bitcoin. I think that does happen. I would put that at 75% likelihood or greater, and I think it happens first 100 days, type of stuff. There's a chance it happens like first couple days. Like Trump, I think is going to put out a bunch of executive orders, as soon as he takes office, and that one may be in there. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that's going to move price all that much if they just, if you just say the government's going to stop selling seized Bitcoin. It doesn't strike me that would pump price a lot, because I don't think the current Bitcoin price has future government selling like discounted into current price. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, they're going to sell it and I'm going to do some NPV calculation. And the market doesn't act like that. I think the market doesn't care until the US government moves the coins, and you see it on change, and then price drags ass for like a couple days or a week or two or whatever. And then it's over. And then the market doesn't care again until you see the coins. So I think removing that doesn't get you a price pop, maybe a little bit, whatever. But there's now 2 paths for this. There's the Lummis bill, right? Buy 200,000 Bitcoin a year for 5 years. And then now there's this bitcoinpolicy.org draft executive order to do this through the exchange stabilization fund. And so that would be without legislation. And I think there's some discussion back and forth about the viability of that path. I won't pretend to be an expert on it. I don't really have a view. I just know that there's the legislative path through the Lummis bill, and then now there is an executive order path. People seem to think you can do this through the exchange stabilization fund. So that's sort of the how. And then it's like, well, do you think it happens in through either of those avenues? It seems to me like there's not a huge push for this, and that there are some factions of the Bitcoin community that are just trying to meme this thing into existence. And maybe that works. Things like that have worked before. And we have seen the movement that Bitcoin and crypto were able to have in the Republican Party, specifically around this election. I'm always reminded of Trump's the tweet that he had in July of 2019. It put a top in the entire market for that like mini cycle that we did. I can't remember. He was like, I'm not a fan of Bitcoin or other digital currencies. I'm a fan of the dollar, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, that was like the last we heard from him from his first administration. And so you got to give credit where credit is due. Crypto and Bitcoin were able to like think about the amount of ground we covered from there to where we are today. So this idea that you can just reach a little bit further and conjure up a Bitcoin strategic reserve, well, shit, we got this far, right? So maybe we can get that far. And then it's like, do I? And I haven't read Nick's. I saw Nick put something out, and I haven't read it yet. He's obviously a smart guy, and I respect his opinion. Like, do I think it's a good idea for the United States to do that as like an American patriot, love America, want America to do well, want America to be the leader of the world, want the US dollar to be the global reserve currency, want the US Treasury to, set the interest rate for every fixed income asset on planet, basically, Jerome Powell basically decides the price of every asset on planet Earth. Like, would I rather it be us than some other country? Yes.
Yes.
Do I think that a Bitcoin strategic reserve is like a hindrance to that? Or like, would this be like the beginning of the end of the dollar? I don't think that. I don't feel that way about it. The way that I would frame it, and you know what? I'm going to be honest about this. I could just be blinded because of my own bags. Because if this shit happens, like it's like like we're really all gonna make, like it's like,
It's true.
so
It's true.
so at least I you know, as a Bitcoin holder, and a guy that runs a crypto fund that knows a lot of Bitcoin, it's like it's easy to get, have that color your view. But my honest view is this. This is the way I thought about it. The US dollar has not been backed by gold since 1971. We still hold a lot of gold. I think we hold like $1 trillion worth of gold. I think M2 for the US dollar is like 20 trillion or something like that. So we got like $1 trillion of gold against 20 trillion of M2. So it's like, why do we still have any gold at all? It's like this relic from the past. Then it's like, why don't we just like sell all the gold? What's the point of even having this? And to me, I think the answer to that question is that, well, all the other major countries, they have it, including our two largest competitors, Russia and China. They have gold and they have a lot of it, and they've been buying a lot. They've been buying a lot more, actually.
Yeah.
So if you sold all the gold and then your competitors buy all the gold and then the price goes up a lot, well, now you're in real trouble. So it's probably good to just
hedge.
Keep some. That's right. It's good to just keep some. And if you, that explanation that I just gave, if you just remove the word gold and then put in the word Bitcoin, this all seems to hold pretty well. Now, there's obviously not the history with Bitcoin that there is with gold. Both the history in terms of, Bretton Woods and previously having a dollar backed by gold, but also the 5,000 years of history that we have with gold as a reserve currency or as a store of value. But so I get that, and it's not that doesn't matter. There's a long history that comes with gold, but I think Bitcoin. There's a reason why gold was chosen as a superior store of value. We used to use salt and big heavy rocks, and we used to have these alternative stores of value. Seashells,
yeah,
that's another great example, right? And there's a reason why gold was a superior store of value. You can think about these things from first principles perspective. It's like the 6 characteristics of money: durable, divisible, portable, uniform, accepted, and scarce. And gold's better than salt on all those, right? And when you line Bitcoin up next to gold within that framework, it's attractive. And it's getting more attractive. The bigger and the more valuable it gets, the better it is against gold, because the acceptability is like the big, like that's the thing where Bitcoin really struggles against gold. It's just sort of the acceptability. But shit, BlackRock's like got $40 billion of this thing, so it's like, it's making a lot of progress on that. So I think that all of that just holds true. And if you take the view that, it's like one of my favorite Satoshi quotes: "In hindsight, it was inevitable." Love that.
That's
right?
That's a Satoshi quote. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. In hindsight, it was inevitable. And I hope I didn't get that wrong. I'm almost sure that
could definitely be right. Quote. I'll look it up.
All right, look it up so I don't mislead people. But if you think that Bitcoin from a first principles perspective is so strong that it's inevitable, then the game theory is sort of very clear that it's just like, well, we should probably move faster and sooner rather than later on this deal. And we already know that there's been a number of sovereigns that, like, it's like Russia's got some huge stack of Bitcoin. They don't have it publicly announced. They didn't do legislation to pass to go buy it, but it's like Russia's got a lot, CCP's got a lot, Middle East got a lot. It's like there's already a lot of movement that's happening around Bitcoin ownership. And so, I think it's probably good to have some.
It's almost like the innovator's dilemma applied to reserve currencies, right? Like the big corporation that's super successful, whatever like the camera company was that like didn't buy Kodak for like digital cameras.
Invented digital cameras and then shelved the whole
exactly.
deal.
Yeah. And so then you get eaten by like, a startup or startup competitor or startup currency or whatever it is. It's like probably worth hedging a bit. But I want to dive some into your background to, the whole point of this podcast is to get to know you. And I think like one of the best ways to do that is through the lens of faith, given how important it is to you and how important it is to a lot of people. So maybe just take us through a couple of highlights of kind of like your career as it relates to faith and kind of weave those two together in terms of, where your faith journey began, where it became really important to you. Cause I don't think you were always this religious or this kind of locked in with your faith. So just curious kind of the highlights and important points along your life and faith and career journey.
Yeah. I'll try and weave the two together. So I was born and raised Southern Baptist. Grew up in a small town in Texas. Small town Texas, Southern Baptist. These two things go together like peas and carrots. My dad was a deacon. My grandfather was a deacon. For people that aren't familiar with the Southern Baptist denomination, this is kind of the most literal, most fundamentalist major denomination of Christianity in America. So church was a big part of my life. Grew up going to church all the time. Church camp. Was baptized when I was 9, I think. And kind of moved away from it.
Because you have to find it for yourself again, right? That was my experience too. It's like you might grow up in the church, but you didn't choose it. Like your parents and tradition and everything else chose it for you. So then at a certain point, you have to go and choose it for yourself again.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. Yeah. And I think relatively early on, I had some questions around it and some stuff that just, as like a early teenager, some just kind of logic questions that were kind of nagging at me a little bit. And I think through high school and college, it was less of a priority in my life. And then in my 20s, it was somewhat of a priority. I was going to church, somewhat, but not a ton. Wasn't really actively reading my Bible, praying some, but not like a super strong, dedicated prayer life. Never a doubt about, never even considered atheism or agnosticism. Never, just wasn't, just over, for a period of time, just wasn't like a big priority in my life. I was a bit of a wild child when I was younger, and then was kind of like a work hard, play hard kind of guy. Got out of college, went into investment banking, did a couple years of investment banking in Houston, doing oil and gas M&A, moved up to Chicago, went to work for a big hedge fund in Chicago, doing long, short energy equities and non-control private equity and debt in the energy industry.
You were probably working a lot of hours during that time. Did you still have a pretty strong faith? Did it help get you through the tough times? Or were you kind of just like locked in on work and then socializing, having fun?
I was pretty locked in on work. And when I was 28, I went through, one of, if not the most difficult times in my life. My dad had a massive stroke, lost a third of his brain functionality, and ended up being significantly, permanently, physically and mentally disabled. So lived, but significantly disabled on the back end of that. My parents were going through a divorce at the time. Through the stroke, we found out about my dad's mistress. Then the mistress was trying to take my dad's money, and this divorce thing. My dad was really mentally handicapped. So then it was it was crazy, a really, really stressful situation for about 18 months. And I just, during that period of time, did not feel again, never even for a moment doubted the existence of God, but I felt like I just didn't have a lot to talk to God about during that period of time. And then what happened for me was, I'll tell the expanded version of this story because I think it was a powerful faith moment for me. So I was leaving Magnetar, and I was interviewing at a bunch of different hedge funds, And I went through all the process, all the way through the process of with point 72. And this was in New York. And I flew out to New York after doing like a bajillion rounds of interviews and all this formal testing, it's crazy interview process. And then go out there, do an office visit, do the first day of the office visit, crush the first day of the office visit, go to dinner that night with some senior guys. The dinner's like, it's kind of feeling like I'm about to get a job offer out of this deal. Like, it's like, and I wake up the next morning and I'm going to have an interview with Steve Cohen. And I was in a hotel in Connecticut and I was struggling to understand why God would want me to go to New York, because New York's to me, I've always thought of it as a very dark place, a lot of dark energy, and there's like no Christians. It is not a very Christian place. I grew up in Texas. It's really easy to be a Christian in Texas. Everywhere you look, people are Christians.
Yeah.
And New York is sort of the polar opposite of that. And so I didn't really understand why God would want me to go to New York. And I got down on my knees right before I was going to this interview. And I go, God, I don't know why you want me to go to New York. So if you don't want me to go to New York, just let this interview not go well. And that's fine. I'll go do whatever you want me to do. That's fine. Because by that point, that was like a big framework that I was living my life by. I believe God has a will for my life, and I want to be in alignment with that will. And if I'm out of alignment with that will, I will feel a disconnect in my life and a kind of hole or just being out of sync. And you're going to feel that. And so you might as well just seek alignment with God's will for your life. And that was already something that was a major framework in my life. So I prayed this prayer and I got up off my knees and I walked in this interview, and Steve gave me a job offer on the spot. I got the interview, he gave me a job offer on the spot. And I walked out of this thing and I go, well, God, I guess I'm supposed to move to New York. And the thing that happened was I moved to New York, I take this job, and immediately living in New York, my faith immediately strengthens significantly. And the way I would describe it is, it was like that the absence of the light strengthened my conviction in the existence of the light. That was the way that I experienced living in New York. A lot of dark energy, not a lot of Christians. And it just made me go, the light is real. It is real. And so I started doing a Bible study regularly for the first time since probably ninth grade. I started praying actively, fervently, started going to church regularly. And that was, as soon as I moved to New York, the strength of faith in my life did this big step change. And then I was struggling. I had been struggling during this period of time having a career in hedge fund investing. I'd struggled with why God wanted me to do this career path, because you talk about worshiping false idols. There is no industry that worships money like the hedge fund industry. None. No, I mean, it is the Mount Everest of worshiping money. And I didn't understand why God would want me to do this, but I also felt like I had been given a brain. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm not good at. And I felt like I had been given a brain that was suited for this kind of work. And just sort of, I've been super analytical my whole life, super logical my whole life. And then sort of like economic decision making based on logic and analysis. This is just like, I felt very suited to do this kind of work. I didn't know why that was, but I felt like, to the extent anything is God-given, that felt like it was God-given. And I had just sort of settled on this view that, like, if God gave me a brain that's suited for this kind of work, and if for whatever reason society has decided that this kind of work, you make a lot more money than other kinds of work, then I just need to give a lot of money away, and I need to not wait until I'm old or dead to give it away. So I was doing some of that. and felt like that was just kind of my path. And then crypto came along, and I finally got around to reading the Bitcoin white paper in May of 2017, and fell down the rabbit hole summer 17, and felt super, super drawn to it. And it was not like me to be interested in something like crypto. It did not pattern match to the things and what I mean by that is I was not a technology investor, and I was not somebody that was passionate about technology like MO life. I just wasn't. A computer was just like a computer,
Right.
like it just, I knew nothing about computer science, nothing about cryptography. When I was in grad school, I did like game theory a lot. And the beauty of the mechanism design of Bitcoin was what ended up that was the main thing that hooked me in. Was I just thought that the mechanism design of Bitcoin, it was impossibly beautiful. It was like, I can't believe this thing actually works. But then I go send a little Bitcoin, and it's like this, it actually works like that. That's unbelievable. And I was so blown away by that. So in that sense, it pattern matched. But in some of these other ways, it really did not. But I felt so strongly about it that I just decided to make a career change. And I left Point 72 in December of 2017. And my plan was to, and this will give you a sense of how strong my faith was in my life at this point. My plan was to go on a mission trip to Africa for 6 months during this period of time. And I did a bunch of research to try and figure out, how do you go do this kind of thing? Oh, you got to be sponsored by a church, this sort of thing. And then what I was going to do is I was going to get done with that. And then I was going to travel. What I wanted to do was I wanted to travel around the world to different international cities where crypto was like a big deal. I wanted to go spend some time in Seoul, and some time in Tokyo, and some time in Germany, and some time in UK, and do these different, and just try and get a sense of what is going on here. Again, this is January 2018. And I was trying to figure out how to get involved to go on this mission trip, and these different avenues. It was I wanted to go then. I was trying to go in a couple weeks, send me, let me go. I'm gonna pay for, I don't need to be sponsored. I'm gonna pay for the whole thing. Just send me and let me go do this.
Yeah.
And nobody would do that. It was this is at least a 6-month lead up process before you can go do something like this. And it was my lease was up on my condo in New York. So there's weird timing stuff where I thought I wanted to go do mission work, and the doors just weren't opening. And then in the meantime, some doors started opening around launching an investment fund within crypto. And I came up with the name Ikigai in February of 2018. And I know you're familiar with it because we've talked about it, but
Yeah.
people probably have heard of the word. It's like the Venn diagram. You've probably seen what you're good at, what you like to do, what the world needs, what you deserve to be paid for. You find these 4 things. You find your Ikigai. It's a very old Japanese word, and it translates kind of to reason for being most closely. And so I'd had this career in traditional hedge fund investing, and I liked doing it, and I was pretty good at it, and I made a fine living doing it. But the world doesn't need another hedge fund manager. And if the world doesn't get another hedge fund manager, the world's going to be just fine. But I felt like the world really needed this technology. And this technology had the potential to make the world a better place. It could do it quickly, in a single generation. This technology could have a huge positive impact on the world. And I felt like I could take this skill set that I developed and go do it in this technology and this asset class that has a lot of potential. And that would give me my 4th circle of Ikigai, what the world needs. And I think that Ikigai, the concept, it's very easy for it to be a kind of backdoor faith framework. It's sort of like a secular approach to a faith framework.
I was just about to say that. It's like a secular version of God's purpose for your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's like what the world needs. Well, how do you go about deciding that, right? Well, a faith framework, this God's will, right? These things make a lot of sense for that kind of deal. And that's exactly how I was thinking about it. Yeah, when I named it that. So I guess I'll pause there. That kind of gets me into, that's like the whole journey, up until getting into crypto.
100%. Yeah. And then, I mean, I would assume like the whole FTX debacle was like the most significant, like both career and faith point up until now. But if not, let's dive into something else that was.
So I think one aspect that I'll mention to people is, so I moved to Los Angeles. I was living in Venice Beach, and when we launched Ikigai, and launched it December 2018, right after the market got crushed, we had like $12 million soft circled for like an initial launch. The market went down 50% in November of 2018. All of that walked away. The entirety of that money walked away. So we launched the money. We launched the fund with extremely small amount of capital. There's no interest. 2019, there's just no interest in putting money into a liquid focused crypto hedge fund. And we had gotten an office. It's expensive to launch a hedge fund. And we had hired a team, and my business partner and we were burning through our savings. I saved a bunch of money, had a good career, had a big monthly cash burn, very low AUM, really was just not getting traction, trying to figure out how to generate good returns in the market. That was like, I think in 2019, I was like understanding how early I was. I didn't feel that early when I left in December of 17, when I left Point 72. I didn't realize how early all of this was. And in a lot of ways, 2018 was the year where it was like crypto collectively realized how incredibly early all of this was, and that 17 was this crazy mania bubble thing. And so my faith was the absolute foundation of my life at that point. And so I was regularly going out to the beach in the morning, and I would do my Bible study. I would pray. I would meditate. I would jump in the Pacific Ocean. It's very cold, kind of like a cold plunge. And then I'd go work 12 or 15 hour days. That was day after day after day. And the weeks turned into months, turned into quarters, turned into years. 2018 turns into 2019, turns into the first part of 2020. My dad passes away right before COVID. My dad passed away in late February of 2020. Go back to College Station, bury him, come back, have like the craziest market and just life in general. Everybody knows what happened with the market in March of 2020, but just life in general was like crazy then. And really, a struggle. And consistently during that period of time, I was praying, God, if you don't want me on this path, pick me up off this path and put me on whatever path you want me to be on, because I don't want to be out of alignment with your will for my life. And I just pray that over and over and over again, and then go work 12 or 15 hour days. And right about the time that it got the tightest, our business really took off, and we had a really good performance. And I had built a reasonably big kind of name for myself in crypto. And as we all remember, the Fed did 3 trillion of QE in 6 weeks. And Paul Tudor Jones wrote a letter calling Bitcoin the fastest horse. And summer of 2020, DeFi summer happens, and just out of nowhere, there's all of this interest in crypto. And so we start raising a lot of money. Our performance is really, really good. And then I have personally had a lot of financial success. And that just felt like, okay, well, I guess this was the path that God wanted me to be on, because I gave it to God for like two and a half years. I was giving this thing to God. And then it's like, and then you have a lot of success. And so, okay, this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. Fast forward to summer of 2022. And by this point, I'd always been having questions around the literalness of the Bible. And at some point, I can't remember when exactly, I can't remember when I discovered Rene Girard and mimetic theory and looking at the story of Jesus Christ through the lens of mimetic theory. I don't remember if that was 17, 18, 19. I can't remember. But at some point, I discovered this and it had this big impact on me. And I just could not stop thinking about Jesus, the story of Jesus Christ through the lens of mimetic theory. And then it made me start to think more and more about the literalness of the Bible and even in the literalness of the New Testament. There's kind of this weird thing that a lot of Christians do where they're like, oh no, like big parts of the Old Testament, this is like figurative, like Adam and Eve is figurative. Parting the Red Sea is figurative. And then it's like, and then you get to the New Testament, and it's like, no, all of this is like completely literal, and it all happened literally exactly how it's written like that. Fine. Okay. But I go to Italy. I'm vacationing in Italy in the summer of 2022, and I spend a week in Rome. And you go see the Vatican, go see the early Christianity stuff, you go see the paganism stuff, the transition, that period of time in the 300s when the Roman Empire was transitioning from paganism into the Roman Catholic Church as the main religion for the Roman Empire. And I'd go see these things, and I was on vacation, so I was trying not to work too much. So I'd like go home and like research these things at night. But anyways, that experience finally allowed me to let go of the literalness of the Bible. And the way I experienced it was, if you finally let go of the literalness of the Bible, then for me, then the next logical question was, well, then what is this book? What is this book? For some people, what happens then is they lose their faith. They become atheist, agnostic. Didn't happen for me like that at all. Never doubted the creationism, a creator, a higher power. Through that period of time, it was almost, I experienced it as it strengthened it, because it was removing some of the cognitive dissonance or faith logic dissonance thing that I was doing, where I was confused about some of the literalness of this. And so by removing that, I felt like I was getting closer to God. And that started, that experience in the summer of 22, then kind of started me on this sort of accelerated deconstruction and reconstruction of my faith, which these are terms that a lot of people go through this, that grow up in a church. A lot of people end up doing some type of deconstructing the faith that they were given by their family that they grew up in. And then some people, unfortunately, stop there and end up as some kind of atheist agnostic. And then there's a lot of people that then do some kind of reconstruction. And so I started on this kind of accelerated journey of that. And then FTX happens, November of 22. And that just felt like this huge, there was obviously this huge thing for us. We had the very large majority of our AUM was on FTX. We were the 18th largest creditor, had a $65 million claim in the FTX bankruptcy. And also, my mom almost died at like the exact same time. My mom went into the hospital 5 days after FTX collapsed, and was in the hospital for 35 of the next 45 days, including a couple instances where it got really serious. And she had, I'll just tell you one little bit of the story. She had emergency, they had to remove part of her colon, emergency surgery to remove part of her colon. And then she had a series of complications from that, including surgical error, that exacerbated. Removing a piece of your colon is like not all that serious, happens all the time, but she had complications and surgical error that made it really serious. And I, right after Thanksgiving 2022, my mother's, her scar broke open in College Station, and the wound broke open from the surgery. And there was part of her intestine protruding from the wound. And my mom was too scared to go to, she'd had such problems with the medical care in College Station. She was scared to go to the hospital in College Station. And she had gotten into contact with a gastrosurgeon in Austin, Texas, and was scheduled to see him a couple days after that. Called that doctor's office. The doctor said, drive to Austin and he will see you at a hospital in Austin. And so there was a piece of my mother's intestine protruding from this wound. And I drove my mom from College Station to Austin. It's about a 2-hour drive. And we were listening to Baptist hymns in the car. And my mom and I were picking out the songs for her funeral.
Damn.
And so that was like 3 weeks after FTX collapsed. So this is all happening at the same time. Immediately, I gave all this to God. And I said, God, if you don't want me to, by the way, my mom is completely fine now, made a full recovery. Nice. It was scary there for a while. She's completely fine now. And I was just giving it to God. And God, if you don't, what do you want me to do? I will do it. You want me to shut down Ikigai? You want me to stay in crypto? You want me to go? You want me to shut down Ikigai, go manage money someplace else? I'll do it. You want me to stay in crypto but not manage money anymore? I'll do that. You want me to leave crypto, go do something else entirely? I'll do that. Tell me what you want me to do, and I will go do it. I don't know. At this point, I don't know anything else to do. And then what I would say about that period of time, and those other prior periods of time when life was just stressful and difficult and running out of money and all these kinds of things. The Bible never promises us cupcakes and rainbows, ever. That is just not part of the deal. What we are promised is a peace that surpasses understanding. That is one of my all-time favorite Bible verses. We are promised a peace that surpasses understanding. And I have experienced that in my own life to a degree that makes that more significant than anything else in my life. It feels more real and more meaningful than anything else in my life. When shit hits the fan, I can give it to God. And like I said, that doesn't mean that shit's not going to hit the fan. But shit can hit the fan and you can give it to God. And then what I've experienced is peace that you don't know why you would feel peaceful in these extremely unpeaceful moments. But we were promised that. And I've experienced it in my own life. And that is if you want to take a secular approach to this, that is a personal development framework that is so far superior to any other personal development framework nothing works better than this. I've experienced in my own life. And I love personal development stuff as well too, and deep breathing and yoga and sauna and cold plunge, all this stuff. I do all of it and I believe in all of it. And I think it's all important, but it's like nothing hits like this hits. And so I go through in the initial wake of FTX collapsing. I really did not think that it really looked like we were going to have to shut down the fund. It didn't look like there was a path for us to continue operating Ikigai. And there was roadblock after roadblock in 2023. And it was just one foot in front of the other. God, what do you want me to do? I felt obviously a deep sense of responsibility. We had 275 LPs, feel a deep sense of responsibility to just try and do whatever I can do that's the best thing for our investors, let me just do that thing. But we had the very large majority of our AUM was in a bankruptcy claim. We had this a little bit that wasn't, but the large majority was just a claim in the FTX bankruptcy. So I was in 2023, I was not working all that much. I had been working 60 hours a week for years or more. And now I was working about 30 hours a week because there just wasn't that much to do. And you're just holding on to a bankruptcy claim. And far and away, the thing that I did with that extra time on my hands that I had not had at any point since I was in college, I had not had this amount of free time, was I went on this faith journey and this deconstruction and reconstruction, and absorbed a ton of content, and wrote a lot. I've written 50 something pages at this point. Haven't really shared it publicly, but had this. And so it's like, you can already tell how this was like, it's not like God made Sam Bankman-Fried commit mass fraud. Like, it's like, that's not what I believe, but it's like the way I've experienced it in my own life was that these things happened and then opportunities arose. And now this faith journey that I've been on that really started, this accelerated faith journey that I've been on that really started in Rome in the summer of 2022. This has now been one of the most impactful things of my entire life, without a doubt. And now I think I feel very called to start to talk about these things publicly and to probably launch like a blog and a podcast talking about God and specifically talking about faith from a perspective that, and because I've consumed so much content in this realm, I feel like I have this like very good understanding of like what the landscape of like who else is talking about faith and science? Like who else is talking about faith and evolution? Who else is talking about faith and philosophy or faith and consciousness or all of those things? Like there are some voices that are doing this. There's not a lot. And I feel very called to start to try and go on like a public learning. It's not like I know, of course I don't know. I will never know. The journey's not about knowing.
Yeah.
But it's almost like I feel like very called to start to learn in public. And I think it will be helpful to people. And it feels like it's going to be something like my life's work. And the incredible thing is like when you're like 39 years old, you've had a few laps around the track, you start to be able to see like how these things like happen in your life. And it's like, oh, this thing couldn't have happened without that thing. And like you rewind back to a period of time and you go, and you had no idea why something was happening. Why is this happening the way it's happening in my life? Why is it happening? And then you fast forward and you get some hindsight and you go, oh, well, this very positive thing in my life, that could not have happened without this thing. And one of the nice things about getting older is you have enough of these and then you go, oh, and now it's like, I don't know. You can just see how things happen in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I got into crypto in 2020 and looking back on the few years I've been in it so far, I've found myself getting not increasingly cynical, but increasingly maybe realistic about like the technology, what stage it's at, how impactful it is. And you've had some really, really public, really like thought-provoking writing on this type of thing. So, I think your thread was called A Lack of Pretense That Any of This Shit Does Anything or Will Ever Do Anything. Like balance that with what you just told me about how, blown away you were and how excited you were about Bitcoin and money that's not tied to any sovereign country and all the other kind of technological advancements that crypto's trying to make. Like, how do you balance the two, having been in crypto for a while now? And where do you think we're at, currently in this cycle in terms of hype versus real interesting things being built?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, my public tone shifted in the wake of FTX. There was some of that before FTX. Like it was like, I mean, I've been writing a monthly newsletter for like over 6 years at this point, and have done a lot of podcasts. So it's like some of it. It's not like I wasn't talking about these sorts of things before FTX, but I just think that 2022, the damage that was done to crypto in 2022, with the crescendo of that being FTX collapsing. But think about all the terrible shit that happened before that, right? Like it was like, there's all kinds of bad stuff that happened before that too. I feel like it really kind of just pulled the curtain back a lot on sort of like what this ecosystem had to show for itself. And for years now, many years, I've thought about Bitcoin really totally separately from everything else. Yeah. And it's still like that. And in some ways it feels more like that than it ever has been. And over the last year or so, I have taken to saying this phrase: Bitcoin has product market fit, stable coins have product market fit, and everything else is basically somewhere between a solution looking for a problem and outright vaporware grift. The very large majority of everything else is somewhere between those two goalposts. And I think that if I rewound to, I think Bitcoin's current market cap actually to me approximately matches like how much progress Bitcoin has made like in the world. You know what I mean? Like the thing's what's it worth? 2 trillion right now, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's worth 2 trillion. And it's like, okay, well, BlackRock bought 40 billion. These ETFs were like, there's like there's like a credible scenario of a sovereign bidding war for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been completely embraced at the absolute highest level of the United States government. Like it's like the things that are happening with Bitcoin adoption approximately match the market cap.
Yeah, it's like 10, 11% of gold probably.
Yeah, that all feels approximately correct. So if you rewound to like 17 or 18 or whatever, and you told me all the good things, all the things that have happened positive with Bitcoin, and then you were like, tell me what the market cap's going to be, I would probably be in the ballpark of where it is, right? So now, if you do the same thing with alts, okay, now alts are worth like $1 trillion, right? And then it's like, if you rewind to 2018 or 19, and you go, okay, it's all worth $1 trillion, what's going on with alts? I would drastically miss the impact that alts are actually having in the real world. Again, kind of outside of stablecoins. And I get it. If you want a stablecoin to be sufficiently decentralized, you need it. It's like, what's the difference between Venmo and like USDC? Or like, well, it's okay. One runs on a blockchain and one's a centralized corporation. But even that, it's like, yeah, but the most popular implementation of a stablecoin is Tether on Tron. And Tron is a Google sheet that's run by Justin Sun. So it's like, whoops,
Yeah.
so that, I think a lot of that is like that setup is like, I think that kind of in a broad brushstroke is sort of characterizes my lament that I've been having, this lack of pretense that any of this shit does anything or will ever do anything. The next month, I wrote this Financial Nihilism, the Zeitgeist of Young America, which that was sort of like this financial nihilism is like the explanation for why there's such a why is there so much speculation that sort of is happening in crypto, and why is it feel so disconnected from fundamentals in terms of actual real world adoption, solving problems in the real world, solutions to problems, use cases that gain significant traction, not like 50,000 active users, like, which is like a successful project in crypto, like,
It's
tens
true.
of millions of users using something, which in the real world, that's what you have to do to actually to have something that impresses people. Like, why? So, and I know that a lot of people feel the same way, because the amount of these were like two of the most viral things that I've ever written. They were the two most viral things I've ever written in crypto. So I got this wave of feedback from all this, and it resonated deeply with a lot of people. So a lot of people are kind of feeling the same way. And I mean, I'll just say it straight up. If I thought God wanted me to leave Ikigai, I would, or to leave crypto, I would leave. If I felt like God wanted me to shut down Ikigai, I would shut it down. The way things went with Ikigai and with the FTX bankruptcy, they could have gone a bunch of different ways. I'll give you a great example. You wouldn't even be remote. So we sold our bankruptcy claim 1 year after the collapse. We sold it in early December of 2023. And you wouldn't even be remotely surprised if, like, the overwhelming majority of my investors were like, give me the money back, I'm out of here. Wouldn't even be remotely surprised. Wouldn't be mad at him. Wouldn't try and talk him out of it. I get it. I totally get it. But that's not what happened at all. The large majority of the money stayed in the fund. And the large majority of our investors were like, we like you guys. We want you to figure out a way to make it through this. And we like want to see you guys do well. And we want to be a part of it. So we're keeping our money. And we even had some investors that put more money in the fund. That's crazy.
Wow.
Like, yeah. It's like, so that could have gone all kinds of different ways. And it went the way that it went. And we're now doing more and more through fully automated execution, which, not to get too much into the weeds around kind of investment strategy and that kind of thing, but the way that we deploy capital now at Ikigai, it is a significantly lower cognitive load than what it had been in the years prior. Like, I don't have to grind 60, 70 hours a week the way that I had to for years. And that also just feels like a complete gift from God that has then now allowed me to have this extra free time to do this faith journey, and then to probably start to do like a public thing around this as well too. So I'm still hopeful for crypto, and even hopeful. I mean, you want to talk about being, I wrote this other thing called quiet quitting. Did you see quiet quitting?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote that. I think that was like in August or something like that, which that one also very viral, resonated with a lot of folks. Like, imagine the exodus that would be going on right now if Harris had won. Like, this would be like a, I think I'm thinking about Kanye when he like accepts the speech for the Grammy or whatever, and he's like, I guess we'll never know. Right? It's like literally a hardcore, like, I guess we'll never know, because we got this other thing, and now it's like this is a dawn of a new day from a regulatory perspective in the United States. This is a whole new hand of cards that crypto just got dealt, where I'm highly convicted that very quickly we are going to have a supportive, helpful, coherent regulatory framework in the United States that I'm hopeful will lead to, changes in token structure and just the alt landscape broadly, that we can just start to solve some more real world problems around all of this stuff. And I don't think that speculation is going to be a big part of this asset class. I don't think that's going anywhere. But I am hopeful that you fast forward a couple years and we just have more to show for ourselves in the real world. And going all the way back to the Ikigai, that it's like this technology has the potential to make the world a better place, and it can do it quickly. It can do it in a single generation. Because it's like, I'll pose it to you as a question. It's like, how much good has crypto done in the world? What does crypto really have to show for itself in its entirety of making a positive impact on the world? And the caveat that because I think just, again, it's just a mental exercise, so you can make it however you want to. In my view, the way you need to do it is you need to do the positive impact net of the negative impact.
Oh, of course. Yeah, for sure.
It's like, to me, that's the fair way to do it. What is the net positive impact on that? So how do you feel about that?
I mean, I think I definitely agree with you. Bitcoin and stable coins. I think like the market or a lot of people agree with that. It's almost like a thing I've heard a lot recently. The only other bright spot, I'm biased. I'm a big deepened guy. I've been in deepened since 2020, but deepened feels like another bright spot. And I think you've talked publicly a bit about that. So I'm curious, just like, what's your take on the space? Are there certain projects that you like or have investments in?
Helium objectively is one of the most successful crypto projects in crypto history. Objectively, it just I don't know exactly what the numbers are about how many people are getting 5G off of the mesh network from Helium, but it's like a very real number. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Yeah, they have like 125,000 mobile subscribers, of which I'm one. I don't think it shows on my phone right now, but that's a super cool stat. And I'm big Helium bull too, for sure.
Yeah. So that's great. And there's other stuff. I think Helium is the largest scale success. There's obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here and to the audience. There's a bunch of other stuff in terms of, Hive Mapper or Render or, these sorts of things. And I think that's a great thing. I'm a little concerned with, when I look at the token structures of deepened in general, they strike me as being susceptible to blowing bubbles and then collapsing, sort of in the same way that Axie Infinity happened.
Yeah.
And I think you probably saw some of that with, I think Helium did a down 90% peak to trough, right? Or 95 even peak to trough. And I think that's because just innately the way the economic system works with these deepened token structures, where speculation, I'll take a step back, and I used to be very passionate about token structure and write about it and think a lot about it. I've done less of that over the last year or two, but in general, with crypto, there is this problem with utility tokens. There is a problem with utility tokens where speculation intersects with the utility of the token.
Because there is a
problem.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. There's a problem there. And the speculation, the involvement of speculators warps the economic system that the utility of the project is right in the middle of. And so this interplay between speculation and utility and token structure, when I use the term token structure, is just like, how does the supply and demand of the token intersect with the use case of the technology? And speculation just throws this big wrench in that. And that has just been true. That's been true for every single day that I have been in crypto. And it continues to be true today. And maybe we're going to get it figured out with regulation. So I think that's what I would say there.
I agree. I mean, from the perspective of someone who's mined a lot of deepens and seen a lot of them try different things, some of which have worked, some of which haven't. Like, one is just like, you're not going to be able to escape how early stage and speculative crypto is, and how tied it's going to be to like global liquidity or people searching for, speculative returns or kind of high risk, high reward scenarios. So no matter what you do with the tokenomics, like around buying tokens and burning them back, accruing, revenue from demand, like it doesn't really matter. What matters more is like where you're at in the market cycle, which kind of sucks, but also is just like part of the game that you play. But I think a lot of that speculation can be really, really good and help like the whole flywheel of network deployment turn faster for a lot of these deepens, right? When the price of the token goes up, people are suddenly being paid $1,000 instead of $100 to do something. So they're way more likely to do it. But then it does warp the system, right? It warps the incentives. Like, I think a way deepens could get around that would be to make their incentives dollar based, not token based, right? So if the price of the token goes up a lot because we're in a bull market and there's speculators, like great. Maybe you allow some of that speculation to still be present, right? To take advantage of it. But then you can vastly reduce the kind of like token emissions that you're putting out there for the same kind of motivation from like the supply side contributors to a network. But there's almost like no tokenomic system that can withstand just like the tsunami wall of like bull markets when things are good, and then also bear markets like when there's just no interest. It's interesting. It's like you're trying to play this economic incentives game within a sandbox that just like massively changes every 4 years, and you're trying to build like your little sandcastle where like, you know, all the rules work, and then like a huge wave just comes. And yeah, we'll have to see where deepens end up. But there's a lot of interesting early stage technology that's being built there. And what I like about deepen a lot is just like there's so many different real world industries that are touched by it. So it's very intellectually stimulating, right? It's like Google Street Maps, and it's like, you know, building Wi-Fi networks, and it's all of these different things, like Uber Eats competitors, Uber competitors. There's just a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, let's talk about AI agents, because I also don't know how to play it, and we talked a bit about this in the beginning. But just like, what is your take? And maybe you don't have a fully formed take yet, but I'm curious how you're thinking about playing it. Is it interesting from an investment perspective? Is it an interesting technology period, you know, et cetera?
Yeah. So the genesis story of GOAT and Terminal Truths was just so fascinating to me. And memetics are fascinating to me. This is like I've written a lot of like my faith framework, and we don't have to go because this is like easily a 2-hour rabbit hole by itself, but it's like a lot of my views on faith and things are like informed by things like memetics. And so it's like the origin story to me of GOAT and Terminal of Truths was just so fascinating. And then now we've had an entire industry we've had a whole sector that's red hot, that has cropped up just in the last couple months, that there's lots of really interesting things happening. It's happening at a really accelerated rate because you're utilizing technology that fundamentally allows for a huge acceleration in the pace of development. Like, it's just like, I think about the quant research work that we do internally at Ikigai and the impact that, you know, Cursor has had on the just the throughput of our quant research efforts. Like, it's unbelievable, right? And so now you're seeing this, and it's kind of like I've characterized it as an AI safety live drill. That's what it reminds me of.
True.
Or that's how I think about it, because you have granted economic resources. You know, I think TOT's wallet, the holdings of its wallet is like worth $20 million or something like that now. Maybe more. I think it's more because it has so much fart coin. It's like 30 million or something. And so it's like, wow, like, whoa, like that's crazy, right? And it's like, you dig into the involvement. This guy, Andy, is the dev that runs TOT, and TOT is not completely autonomous. Andy is like, for example, TOT tweets, but it doesn't tweet without Andy approving the tweet going out.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this isn't, Andy's talked about this publicly. So it's not, he tries to hide it, I think, a little bit, but he has talked about that publicly. So, and so it's kind of this hybrid thing that's going on right now, where it's like, an LLM with like a human attached to it. But that reminds me of, advanced chess, which is like I think in 1996, Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. And from that moment on, a computer has always been able to beat the best human chess player in the world. But they started these tournaments where it was a human that was allowed to have a laptop with them running, so you could have help from the software alongside it. And most of the time, you just take the software's recommended move, but like every once in a while, the human overrides the software. You call this advanced chess. And from then on, the hybrid could beat the computer.
Interesting.
And so and so there's like pattern matching to that, right? So that's what sort of reminds me of kind of what's going on right now. And it's great to me that this is happening in the decentralized manner that it's happening. This is that from a humanity perspective, this is like a tremendously positive thing, because I am worried about the centralization that's happening in AI. And it felt just a few months ago, so I was not a believer. Everything in AI crypto that happened before Go and TOT, I was not a believer in. Like, I know there's some Tau bulls. I tried to get fired up about Tau. I really couldn't get there. And then everything else, it's like, it's a scam, dude. It's just a joke, right? Like, it's like FET or whatever. Like, it's like, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And there's not going to be anything there. Right. And I'm sorry if there's some FET bulls here or whatever, but like, and so I did not in any way believe in AI crypto's potential, like prior to just a few months ago. And one of the things that worried me so much about it was that AI was very hard, and it is like the execution like you think about the level of execution going on in OpenAI, in Anthropic, in Grok. Like, it's like, this is just true next level gigabrain people, a lot of them, not one, not five, not 10, like, it's like these huge teams of unbelievably gigabrain people, and they're burning through billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure, right? Because that's what it takes to run these things. And the coordination that's required around that, the capital raising, like, it's like, this is something where it felt like centralization had such a advantage. And I was thrilled to obviously see Elon. I'm a big Elon fan. I was thrilled to see that Elon was taking all this stuff on the way he is, because I'm like, I mean, I don't know how you feel about Sam Altman, but like, it looks incredibly apparent to me that this guy's like just a complete piece of shit. Like, it's just like,
he almost seems like an evil version of Elon.
Evil. He's like, dude, if the guy was
sus, like, what's going on there? Yeah.
And you start to think about like whatever, like like Revelations. I don't even know what to think about the book of Revelation or whatever. But it's like, if you literally told me that like Sam Altman, it turns out Sam Altman was the Antichrist, and like OpenAI like ended the world. Like, it's like, in hindsight, you'd be like, there were a lot of signs. There were lots of signs, right?
For sure.
And so I was very worried about that. Had been worried about that for a while, because I just think he gives off terrible vibes even before. Now Elon hates him, and if I lend a lot of credibility, it's like, if Elon hates this guy as much as he does and is worried about him, he's so worried about him that he's like, shit, I got to do this myself, because I'm so worried about this guy and the advantage that OpenAI has, that it's very obvious this guy's like a bad dude to me. And so I was worried about that whole setup, but I did not have belief that crypto could compete at that level, because I think crypto, if you just look at the body of evidence, crypto has a really bad track record of execution. We just have we do not have a lot to show for ourselves in terms of being able to really good executors. Then this and then that, we get this accomplished and that. Like, it's just like, there's not a lot of that going on in crypto, in my view, over the last however many years.
Yeah.
But now you fast forward to this AI agent thing, and the way that this is developing, and the way that you took the existing meme coin sector, which was big and vibrant and had a lot of capital flows before this AI agent thing, wasn't going anywhere, looked like it was getting bigger. You took that thing and then you combined it with AI agents. And then now you have AI agents that have economic resources. And like, I don't think that the centralized AI companies, it doesn't seem like they could do that. Like, they just like, maybe I'm wrong about that. And Lord knows that if you launched an OpenAI agent and then that OpenAI agent was like, I'm going to launch a meme coin, Lord knows the thing would be worth billions and billions of dollars out of the gate. And maybe they are going to do that. I don't know. But it strikes me that they're not going to do that. And that just the way centralized corporations work and what their product roadmap, it just seems like that's not the route they're going to go, which means we actually have found this lane and this avenue to do experimentation and innovation in a way that they can't compete with us. We can't get our ass beat by like these extremely well-capitalized, giga-brained, centralized corporations. And so what's to come of it, I don't know. I wouldn't make any bets about that. But I do think it's like the most interesting thing going on in crypto right now. Certainly, if you're investing in these things, buyer beware. I mean, they like it's like the price volatility is like unbelievable. They collapse constantly. There's rugs constantly. Again, like everything else in crypto, 99% of it is vaporware. Well over 99% of this shit will never do anything. I saw 2 weeks ago at the peak, they were launching 1,100 agents a day on virtuals at the peak. So like, it's like 99.999% of this stuff will do nothing and the price will collapse. So like, if you're thinking about putting money into it, you got to understand how volatile and risky, and you will probably lose your money. Like, it's like, just, I want to say that, but looking at it, paying attention to it, doing research on it, I think it's well worth your time. And it's just fascinating. So to me, it's like an easy thing to want to spend time on because it's interesting.
100%. Yeah, I need to get up to speed on it because it feels like something that, I mean, it has played out a bit. I feel like I missed the boat somewhat, but it's also just like, we're in crypto. Like the rest of the world hasn't even heard about this yet. And it does seem like it has the potential to be very impactful and also have a lot of kind of financial upside. So something to pay attention to for sure. Getting back to religion, do you think there's one true religion?
I think there's one God.
Okay.
Yeah. I do think there's one God. I think that humans are completely and utterly unable to even begin to comprehend the nature of that God. We are just, I'll give you an example, right? This is something this is like a kind of thought exercise that's been impactful for me. Like we can experience 3 spatial dimensions and kind of one time dimension or half a time dimension, because time only moves in one way. And then there's pretty good, we don't have a lot of rock solid evidence for other dimensions, but there's like a good amount of theoretical math that points to there being numerous other dimensions that exist outside of the ones that we can experience spatially or temporally. And there's disagreements about how many, maybe there's 8 or 12 or 20 or 26, or like there's different, but experts seem to be quite confident that there's numerous other dimensions that we cannot experience. And I would certainly think that the creator of this universe exists outside of this dimension that we can experience. Like, I don't think that God is like sitting somewhere in this universe, and if you had a fast enough space shuttle, you could like take the shuttle to like where God is sitting on a planet. So like, I just think God exists outside of space-time and outside of this universe.
Yeah.
And outside of this dimension. But it's like, I can't even begin to comprehend what that is like outside of this dimension. Like, I can't comprehend it. I can watch Interstellar, or like, like it's like I can sort of take some grasp at that, but it falls woefully short of actually full comprehension. So I have been able to, and for a lot of people, I think this can be unanchoring. And actually, for a lot of people's faith framework, they do the opposite of this. They personify God. And there's many examples of this, right? Like, it's like, no, God, it's like a white beard, we got the pearly gates, the streets paved with gold. Like it's like, and I get why a lot of people do that. And especially like in the pre-science age, like it's like, we knew you fast forward like, or you rewind like 200 years, it's like we knew like almost nothing about space, right? So it's like, and the scientific method is like, so you rewind a little bit in history, and I understand why you would personify God. And even today, I understand you hear some denominations of evangelical Christianity talk about like daddy God. I don't know if you've like heard people talk about that, like just trying to personify God as a father figure that is all loving. And I get all that. If that works for you, that's great. For me, I have actually been able to get closer to God by comprehending how incomprehensible God is, by like better understanding the incomprehensibility of the nature of God. And so all of that to say, the way that I think of the major world religions is that these are just different cultures that are grasping at trying to comprehend this incomprehensible entity. And I think that there is truth in a number of them. And I won't pretend to have nearly as good of a knowledge base about any of the other ones other than Christianity. My knowledge base is much, much greater in Christianity, but I have spent some time with Hinduism and with Buddhism and with Islam and a lot of time in the Old Testament. So Judaism, a lot of time with Judaism, because it's just a big part of Christianity. And what I would say about this, and this is, I take a very evolutionary view. A lot of my faith beliefs are informed by evolution, and I'm a believer in evolution. I think we came from apes. This looks like rock solid evidence to me. So I comprehend the nature of humanity and the way that humanity's relationship with a higher power for me is informed by, we used to be apes. And we were these cavemen, Australopithecus and Neanderthals and these sorts of things before we were this, before we became Homo sapiens. And so I think about God within the context of that. For me, my view on Christianity is that, because we now have the benefit of 2,000 years of hindsight of Christianity, a little less, but yeah. In my view, Christianity from an evolutionary perspective appears to be the superior. Things have gone better for the humans that based their society on Christianity than it has for other civilizations that were based on other religions. And in my view, I actually think that that's inarguable. I don't think you can. And if there are people here that are Muslim or Hindu, I'm not trying to offend anybody whatsoever. But when I just look at, and this is also not to say that there hasn't been tremendously bad things done in the name of the Christian church, because that's not even remotely true either. There's been all kinds of bad things, kinds of bad shit that has happened in the name of Christ. It's going back, but then even today, it's like, the Catholic Church and also part of the Protestant church, like there's a child rape epidemic in the Christian church. It's the most evil thing imaginable. So it's not like I'm trying to give a pass to any of that. But with all of that to say, when you look at the history of Christianity, the proliferation of Christianity, and then what has popped up that was based on Christian ideals or came out of Christian cultures, so much of the advancement of the human species came out of that. And my personal answer to what is the purpose of life on earth is to advance is human species advancement. Because in my view, the more advanced we are as a species, the greater potential we have to comprehend God. And so you can know God more deeply. You have the potential to know the nature of God more deeply, the more advanced a species is. I think that humans can comprehend the nature of God more fully than a caveman, more in that, and a caveman maybe more fully than a chimpanzee, more
Yeah,
fully than an amoeba, right? I don't know
for
that to be
sure.
true. Maybe an amoeba is closer to God than I just don't get it, maybe. But like, that's a framework that makes a lot of sense for me. And so for me, our purpose, the purpose is for human advancement. And so my entire views on a moral framework are based on this, like, what is the best thing for advancing the human species? And in my view, Christianity, the story of Jesus Christ, the memetics around the story of Jesus Christ, and then the teachings of Jesus Christ as a moral framework to build a society on top of. You would not have democracy without the Christian ideals are intertwined with democracy. The United States of America, this was built on Christian ideals. We separated church and state, but you can't argue that the United States was not founded on Christian liberty. That liberty, everybody is the same and should be treated the same and have the same life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that is like the teachings of Jesus Christ, just said in different words.
Yeah.
And the United States is this is the greatest civilization in human history. Our problems notwithstanding, again, far from perfect, but you could not make an argument for anything other than that. And our poor people, it's not that we don't have poor people. Our poor people have it better than any other poor people on planet Earth. But pretty much, there are exceptions to that, and there's actually exceptions that are based on atheistic. You think about Scandinavian countries that don't have a lot of religion, and they are doing things very well there. But that's also a group of like 3 million people. It's like you're talking about 3, 4, 5 million people or something like that. We're doing it at 350. So at scale, right? And when you compare, you go and you say, okay, what are the countries that have the highest percentage of Muslim population? What are the countries that have the highest percentage of Hindu population, of Buddhist population? How are things going there? How are things going there in general? They're not going the way that it's going here. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But just objectively, again, I'm not trying to make anybody mad by saying that is facts. And so that was long-winded, but I wanted to kind of loop in I wanted to loop in that facet of the kind of like, what's my view on all the other, on all major world religions. Yeah.
No, that was a great answer. I mean, I hadn't thought about it in terms of like assessing the different world religions in terms of the output or the result, in terms of just like quality of life and, economic wealth and everything else. But that's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, at the current moment, I would say, yeah, that like Christianity and Christian nations and like Western nations seem to be on top. There's also been many times in the past where like that probably wasn't the case. Probably in like the distant past, right? When it seemed like, dynasties in China or India were like ahead of the world in various capacities. But the last, 400 or 500 years, it definitely seems like the West and Christianity and Christian ideals have kind of come out on top. And not that it's even a competition, right? But it's just like the different interpretations of different cultures of God. When you said kind of your moral framework revolving around, or like the goal for you for humanity is to advance itself, but that sounds like an Elon thing. But then you added like to be able to know God more fully. And I think that kind of brings us back to the beginning of the conversation about like what is even the point of all this, right? Like, I don't know why your Let's Go God tweet resonated with me the way it did, but there's so much valuable, meaningful things to do in like the surface materialistic world, right? Like building a career, making money for yourself, your family, etc. But there is something a lot greater. And I think it is the search for God, or the search for something greater or a higher power. And I would hope that more people would embark on that journey, because I think it's what's really, really meaningful out of life at the end of the day. And I think it helps you, even in a secular like performance way, which we can talk about too, in a lot of different aspects. You've talked about like morality or a belief in a higher power as like an adaptive trait. And so even from like a secular point of view, right, like when you're going through tough times, like FTX and your mom and everything else, like if you hadn't had a faith belief, who knows, maybe you wouldn't have made it, right? Like, you know, it would have been much more difficult. And that peace that surpasses all understanding literally probably helped you perform better, whether it was trading, whether it was taking care of your mom, whatever it was.
The incomprehensibility of God that we talked about earlier, and you hold that in one hand, and then I have written about and just chewed on a lot this idea of acting as if. Like, some of these things I don't know if they literally happened, but acting as if they literally happened is good for you and it's good for humanity. It's like provably good for you and provably good for humanity. And maybe that's like the closest that we can ever get. Like, we're not going to be able to get like closer to comprehending the nature of God because it's just incomprehensible. And so you're like moving in the world with these frameworks. There are these a belief system that maybe may or may not be literally true. Maybe may or may not be literally true, but it's just like the belief system is so obviously helpful. And it's helpful. I always think about these things at like the micro level, the individual level, but then it needs to roll up to the macro. It needs to work good for humanity as well too. Because I think like sometimes it's like there can be things that like don't work, but maybe it like works well like the micro level, but then it like doesn't scale, like to use like a technology term or something like that. So like I feel like when I'm trying to think through, morality, like I'm looking for things that work at both levels. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole act as if thing definitely resonates, because if it is all true, right, the upside's eternal life and the downside's eternal damnation. And if it's not true, you still would have acted in a way that made your life better on the micro level and also improved society kind of on the macro level. You were a force for good and light in the world versus anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing.
100%. Well, this is a fantastic, super meaningful conversation. Is there anything else you want to hit before we wrap? We covered a lot.
No, we covered a lot. It was a great conversation. I mean, there's a lot of those are rabbit holes that are deep. So
For sure.
Yeah, we really just brushed the surface on a lot of them, but I guess this is the most I've ever talked about this stuff publicly, but like I said, I'm planning on talking about it a lot more publicly. So if I was gonna, it's like normally at the end of these, people are like, throw out your Twitter handle, or it's like, oh, you want to sign up for my like monthly newsletter. So I don't know what I'm not sure what the like call to action is here.
Search for something deeper.
Yeah,
search for something deeper.
That's right. Search. And maybe there's people listening to this that have prayed consistently their entire life. And maybe there are people listening to this that have never said a prayer in their entire life, and everybody in between. And that's okay. And regardless, I believe with every fiber of my being that you can communicate with God. I don't know how it works. I have no idea how it works. But I do it, and it makes you feel better. And my life hasn't been rainbows and cupcakes, but it's been meaningful and it's been fulfilling. And I don't know, if you took all the world's problems and threw them in a pile and threw my problems in with a pile, I would want my problems back. Not, like I feel incredibly blessed. I really feel like I have been very blessed. And I again, I won't pretend to know why it is that some people seem like they've got blessed lives and other people just get hit, just have such a rough go at it. I don't understand why that is. But I would just invite people you can start a dialogue with God. You can Google how to pray. I bet you find some great stuff. Say the Lord's Prayer, or just, seek. Yeah, seek. I feel so strongly that you will find positive benefit from that. So strongly.
100%. Last thing is, what's next for you in 2025? What do you have on the calendar for kind of your goals, your dreams,
Run an
aspirations.
Ikigai.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely continuing to run Ikigai. And it looks like 2025 is going to be a good year for crypto. And then I think there's going to be a blog and a podcast that's going to be,
Do it.
I don't know, if you were intrigued by thinking about God from the lens of evolution, or morality from the evolution, or morality through the lens of evolution, if that kind of stuff, you're like, wow, I've never heard something like that before. Like I'm trying to do like a whole podcast and a blog, like that's basically like stuff like that, basically.
I think you definitely should, because I think you're uniquely positioned to talk about a lot of this stuff. And I feel like also crypto feels godless sometimes. And also looking at religion and faith through that lens, kind of those 5 or 6 secular studies, whether it's philosophy or chemistry or biology or anything else, looking at faith through those lenses, I think really appeals to like intelligent, logical people. And you'll find a lot of those in crypto and financial markets and everything else. So it's almost like, you know, if you don't do it, who will, right? Like who's positioned to do it, and who has the passion and the motivation to do it, and who will people listen to? And I don't think there's that many people out there that will. So I look forward to hearing more about it, about all that. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for your time. I enjoyed it. This is one of the most unique. I've done a lot of podcasts. Yeah, maybe the most unique one I've ever done. So thank you.
Sweet. Well, I think we were both called to do it, but I really appreciate you coming on, and yeah, look forward to keeping in touch and hearing about all of your endeavors in 25.
Excellent.